Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and as the events of today have unfolded, in particular this weekend, I've started to come to a bit of a conclusion about Theresa May in terms of shifting her Brexit position. And I don't think it's a good thing. I think it's likely now that Theresa May favours a no deal. She's been holding private conversations with influential MPs that definitely support a no deal Brexit. This has not been Theresa May's position at all. Now it's been fairly obvious that she has been doing throughout this process what she needs to appease the hard right. This is because they're the ones threatening to split the party. The more numerous, relatively moderate Tory MPs were not. So May acted to keep the ERG on board and ignored the others. But in all this, May only moved as far as she needed to prevent all-out civil war in her party. After all, the ERG have never really supported her stance on this. It's just she's kept going down a path that allows them to think, well, yeah, you could go down there and that still gets us what we want. So what has finally caused Theresa May to appear now to capitulate completely to the far right of her party? One possibility is that she was potentially hoping that Parliament would take control. She's been afraid of taking positive steps on Brexit for fear of splitting that party, so she ran down the clock at every opportunity. I think now to give Parliament the chance to take over in sheer exasperation. Now, when a vote came up for an extension of Article 50, it was passed handsomely in the House of Commons. However, it was mainly the opposition MPs pushing it through. Most of her MPs voted against it. Now let that sink in. Imagine that you are the leader of the Conservative Party. Yes, you are the Prime Minister, but you are the leader of the Conservative Party. And let's also imagine that you care about the party above all other things. What are you going to do in a situation where most of your MPs have just voted against an extension to Article 50? And think about what's led up to this. So this is where we had our series of votes. So Parliament rejected May's deal by a hefty margin again. She was not as big a margin as before, but it was 149 difference. So it was roundly defeated, and that included a big chunk of her MPs voting against it. Then Parliament voted against a no deal. All right, fine. But the attitude has always been that voting against a no deal doesn't stop a no deal. But then when it comes to extending Article 50, well, if you're not going to vote for her deal and you don't want no deal, whatever you do want needs an extension. If you imagine that the EU are suddenly going to turn around and say, OK, we'll let you renegotiate the deal, which they won't, but if you imagined that, you still know you need an extension. If you want to leave without a deal, but at least want to leave in an ordered manner, you still need an extension. If you want to conduct a second referendum, you need an extension. So when most of her MPs said no to the extension of any length, and remember, she was only arguing for a short extension anyway, they said no still. That means that what they were voting for was a chaotic exit from the EU. And then finally, her own cabinet have now started to rebel against any prospect of a long extension. Remember, we can have a long extension as long as we agree to take part in European elections and as long as we have a plan for it. But her cabinet, and we know which part of the cabinet this is, by the way, it is very much the Brexiteer part of the cabinet. And so they've basically been saying no to this. She's basically been convinced that a long extension would break her party. And remember, as I said, for her, the party comes above everything. So although we keep saying that Theresa May won't shift at all on Brexit, she's never shifted her red lines, I think she has shifted her Brexit position, and I think she has for those reasons. So as I suggested back in January, I think it was, there is a very real risk that what Theresa May is deciding is that no deal is the best way of keeping her party together. Now, my personal view is that the party wouldn't split. I think it's a bluff. I mean, if they split, what would they split into? The far right and the centre right, two different parties? That would guarantee that the far right would never get into power again. The reasons why the Conservatives are almost always in power is not because the UK is particularly right-wing, it's because there are so many voting options for the left of politics that splits that vote. The Conservatives exist in isolation as the only credible party on the right. Sure, UKIP nicked votes from them, they took some from Labour as well, all right, they've taken more from the Conservatives. But that wasn't, again, a serious prospect. The only time there's been a UKIP MP is when a Conservative MP joined UKIP. Okay, they then won the election as well, but they've gone since. And so, and if you're in a situation where neither of them can gain overall majority, you'd think to yourself, well, yeah, okay, well, then they'd form coalitions, and then that'd give the far right more power because they'd have to be given cabinet positions, all the rest of it. But then we come down to the same reasons why people keep saying to me, if there's so many people want to remain, why don't they vote for the Liberal Democrats in larger numbers? And it's because nobody sees the Liberal Democrats as a serious contender for a majority government. Remember, and I know how confusing this is in a lot of European countries where you're used to coalitions and you see the advantage in coalitions. And I see that too. We don't have that mindset in this country. We have the mindset in this country that the government is the party that has a majority, an overall majority in Parliament. This is why our system's breaking down when we're not getting this, because we don't know how to cope. The Prime Minister has been increasingly belligerent, refusing to engage cross-party, specifically because Prime Ministers in this country are used to saying, right, these are our policies, this is what I put in my manifesto, this is what we're going to do. Because they've got the numbers to push it through and completely ignore any MPs outside of their party and the few rebels they have in their own party. They don't need them. Well, now they do, but they don't know how to cope. So the same thing would happen here. People would no longer see either of them as a prospect for government. And it might actually end up being Labour and the Liberal Democrats, ironically, that end up becoming the larger parties. Maybe, maybe not. It certainly wouldn't be the far right party. That certainly wouldn't happen. So the far right are not going to give up that sort of power by splitting the party. I would absolutely call that bluff. But Theresa May and many other MPs as well have been convinced that they would, mistaking them for mad dogs rather than reasoning sociopaths. So, as I say, back in January, I wasn't sure whether Theresa May planned to roll us off the cliff edge to keep her party together or pull out a cunning plan to screw over the ERG at the last minute, like she did when she was Home Secretary, because she had form on this. Because at the time, her actions could have been leading either way. But now I think I'm as convinced as I can be without being absolutely certain that she is now favouring a no deal as the only way she sees of keeping her pestilent party together. And to say this is reckless is a massive understatement. But I think that is now her line. So what we now need, Parliament has to take over. It has to, otherwise I can't even imagine what's going to happen in the next few weeks. So anyway, I hope you found that interesting, and your comments down below, of course. If you've enjoyed the video, don't forget to click the like button, subscribe for further content. Until next time, I'll see you later.